Mollis, please.
Hello, this is Deb calling from the OSF Medical Group. I have a patient who is having a lot of pain and threatening suicide.
Okay, what's the address?
110 South Main Street in Alexis, Illinois.
Okay, and how old are they?
He is a 42-year-old male, and he's a veteran. So I don't know if he's got guns or anything like that there. He tells me he does have a plan. I always have a plan, he says.
Okay, is he given specifics at all?
No specifics. He's got this terrible bilateral hand pain, and he says that he uses the words to me, suicidal ideation. So that says to me, he knows what he's talking about. He's been this route before.
Okay.
Okay, and his name is Joshua Hinkle, Hinkle.
Okay, do you have a middle initial date of birth for him?
I don't have a middle initial. I do have a date of birth. That's 8/5 of 1981.
Alrighty, I will go ahead and have them head that way, and if you have any updates, just go ahead and give us a call back, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
Yep, no problem.
Bye-bye now.
Bye. Alexis Ambulance from Warren County 911. Have a suicide threat. 110 South Main Street, Alexis. Alexis Ambulance, Warren County 911. Suicide threat. 110 South Main Street, Alexis. 42-year-old male subject called OSF Medical Group, advising he has a lot.
Come around this way.
Should I take this off?
No, just if you grab that one, I will pull you back.
My name is Joshua, son of David, son of Dennis, son of Clarence. I am Norse in bloodline and belief. This is my story. I call to chaos, to smoke, to shadow, to tricksters 3, to Loki, god of storytelling, to the red-faced, rabbit-eared one who haunts my dreams, to Anansi, because all stories belong to Anansi. They used to belong to Tiger, but now they belong to Anansi the spider. The following presentation explores the profound cultural and spiritual ramifications of forced submission through a deeply personal experience. One that challenged not only my identity, but also my beliefs and understanding of power dynamics. On July 18th, I found myself at the center of a traumatic and life-altering event. It started when I reached out to the VA for emergency care, as I had been instructed to do during a flare-up of my chronic condition, complex regional pain syndrome. Like many veterans, I feared being stuck with the emergency room bills due to VA authorization issues. So, I called ahead to the hospital to avoid any problems. During intake, I likely scored high on the suicide awareness checklist, which, unbeknownst to me, triggered a mandatory wellness check by the local sheriff's office. What happened next felt more like a tactical assault than a wellness check. A SWAT-style raid descended upon me in the middle of my small town. Armed and in full tactical gear, the sheriff's deputies arrived as though confronting an imminent threat. I was handcuffed at shotgun point, forced to kneel in submission on the main street of Alexis, a town of only 700 people. The event unfolded in full public view, with neighbors watching in disbelief. Being placed on my knees at gunpoint was not just a physical act, it was an assault on my dignity and spiritual identity. As a practitioner of New Norse paganism, I have taken an oath never to kneel before any man or god. This vow represents autonomy, defiance, and my commitment to never submit to unjust authority. At that moment, however, I was stripped of my agency and forced into a position that directly contradicted my spiritual beliefs. This act of submission imposed by law enforcement violated my core principles, resonating deeply with the cultural symbolism of kneeling in my spiritual practice. Dr. Bron Taylor explores the relationship between personal autonomy, spiritual identity, and resistance to dominant forces in dark green religion. His work emphasizes how many spiritual traditions, particularly those rooted in nature and independence, teach individuals to resist oppressive power structures rather than submit to them. For me, that moment of kneeling felt like a forced submission to authority and a system I had long resisted. Over the next few days, among other things, I started believing that I had failed at my faith. Until a conversation with a close friend, the cultural interpretation of the event shifted. She, though, her Native American heritage, viewed my forced kneeling as an act of counting coup. A powerful tradition in many indigenous cultures where a warrior touches an enemy in battle without causing harm, risking their life to show defiance and bravery. In this context, kneeling was not simply an act of submission, but a moment of defiance, reclaiming my agency in the face of overwhelming force. Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, in Braiding Sweetgrass, speaks to this idea of cultural reclamation, showing how acts of resistance are often deeply rooted in cultural narratives of resilience and defiance. Through my friend's lens, what I had experienced as a moment of profound personal violation was reframed as an act of spiritual victory, transforming the narrative from subjugation to courage. This profound shift in interpretation became the foundation for my project, Kneeling in Defiance, an art-based cultural dialogue. Through art, I explore the multifaceted symbolism of kneeling, contrasting the divergent cultural interpretations that arise from a single act. The artworks capture the tension between subjugation and resistance, visually representing how gestures imposed by one culture can be reinterpreted as acts of defiance and honor in another. Why art? Art bridges these cultural perspectives, providing a visual language that conveys the complexities of such experiences in ways that words often cannot. In this project, I use mixed media pieces to juxtapose the militarized imagery of law enforcement with symbols of spiritual and cultural resistance. The pieces illustrate the paradox of being forced to submit yet reclaiming power through cultural reinterpretation. In her work, Into the Crucible, Dr. Jacqueline Scott reflects on how art allows us to confront and challenge power dynamics. She argues that artwork engaging with oppression becomes not just a reflection of suffering, but an active site of resistance and resilience. In Kneeling in Defiance, the artwork becomes a dialogue between traditions, one that opposes submission, and another that reclaims the act as an assertion of identity and courage. Let me take a moment to delve deeper into the events of July 18th. After the deputies forced me to my knees, I was handcuffed and perp-walked in front of the entire community, wearing nothing but my underwear. What was intended to be a wellness check became a public spectacle and a demonstration of power and authority that was entirely disproportionate to the situation. At that moment, I was not seen as needing help, but as a threat to be neutralized. The militarization of law enforcement in small towns like Alexis is a stark reminder of how easily systems of care can transform into systems of control. As Dr. Taylor discusses in Dark Green Religion, the systems of power that govern our lives often impose their will in ways that strip individuals of their autonomy, reducing them to mere objects of control rather than people deserving of care and dignity. This experience highlighted for me how easily the lines between care and control can blur, especially in a world where militarized policing tactics are used in response to mental health crises. But what made this experience even more meaningful was the way my friend, a Native American, reframed it. She saw an echo of her people's history in my forced submission, counting coup against an overwhelming force. This act of touching the enemy without violence, risking everything to demonstrate one's bravery, became a way for her to reinterpret my experience as a moment of courage rather than victimization. In her reflections on Indigenous resilience, Dr. Kimmerer speaks to the importance of cultural context in shaping our responses to crisis. She emphasizes that understanding the stories and traditions that frame our actions can transform moments of suffering into acts of resistance, bridging the personal with the cultural. Her insights shaped how I began to see my own experience as a victim of a militarized system and as someone who could reclaim that moment through a different lens. Art becomes a powerful tool for navigating these complex cultural understandings in this project. Each artwork becomes more than a representation of the moment. It becomes a conversation between traditions, power and resistance, subjugation and reclamation. Art is the medium through which these dialogues happen, offering a space for empathy and reflection. As Dr. Jacqueline Scott notes, the crucible of oppression often gives rise to acts of resilience that challenge the systems imposing control. In this sense, art becomes a battlefield where personal and cultural resistance can flourish, transforming what was once an act of submission into one of spiritual and cultural power. Projects like Kneeling in Defiance seek to create that space, inviting viewers to see how a single gesture, kneeling, can hold vastly different meanings depending on one's cultural or spiritual context. Projects like this ask us to consider the power of perspective in shaping our understanding of events and actions. Through the lens of paganism, kneeling was an assault on my autonomy. Through indigenous tradition, it became an act of courageous defiance. Both interpretations are valid, and both speak to the complex ways in which individuals and cultures interpret moments of crisis. I invite you to engage with these divergent perspectives and consider how a gesture like kneeling can be reclaimed as a symbol of resistance. This project demonstrates how art serves as a bridge, bringing cultural narratives into conversation and fostering empathy across divides. Thank you for this opportunity. Kneeling in Defiance, an art-based cultural dialogue.